Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Phil. I work at Applied Frameworks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time kind of talking about us. We'll distribute this deck afterwards if you'd like. We pretty much do consulting and training and stuff. The safe practice is new as of this year, and I'm blessed to be able to have some really amazing, talented people I'm working with. So let's just get right into it. Today's talk, we're going to talk about just level set. I think everybody here probably knows what a roam board is, but just in case, I'll touch on that. We'll talk about some of the pitfalls to avoid, some practices you might consider, have some examples of kind of roam in the real world, and then, as Silvio mentioned, time for Q&A. Right. If you have questions as I'm going, you can put them into chat. I'll try and answer them as I go, but we do have that dedicated time at the end. So, and first off, what is a roam board? All right, so roam board, it's something that we use during PI planning, sometimes only during PI planning. And it's part of the standard agenda that at the end of the planning event, on day 2 or 3, depending on what kind of schedule you're using, all of the risks are roamed. They're resolved, they're owned, they're accepted, or they're mitigated. And people celebrate because, hey, all of our risks are done. Yay, us, PI planning is over, and we move on. There's some challenges with that model, though. It doesn't always work out well for the art if you just kind of leave it at that. And so what are some of those things that you might want to avoid? Well, one of the number one, you know what? We ran out of time during PI planning. We've got all these risks, but we don't have time for that because our team breakouts went long. This is our first time doing it. We're remote. So you know what? We'll just deal with that later. We'll have the RTE go and roam the risks on their own when everybody's done. Right? Be careful of that model. There's some challenges with it. Or, hey, so-and-so took ownership and we move them over into owned, but we didn't actually document who's doing it, right? Or worse, what if we've assigned the risks to somebody, right? Where we basically said, hey, this risk belongs to Raj. You know what? Give that one to Raj too. Well, Raj is even in the room, right? So the idea with risks is that we want these to be something that somebody volunteers to take ownership of, instead of just simply, okay, give that one to Silvio, give that one to Raphael, give that one to Raj, right? Another thing you might avoid is that everything's a program risk, right? Well, Phil sometimes talks too much when he's on a stand-up, and that could cause us to not be able to truly understand what our impediments are one day out of the iteration, and therefore we might not be able to meet our PI objectives. Well, okay, not really a risk, right? So this is designed to be program risks, the things that can stop the teams and the arts from meeting their committed objectives. And so, kind of keep in mind, is it really a risk or not, right? Which ones really matter? Another pitfall. This is one that's sad but true. You see this more and more. The same risks come up every single PI, right? Whoops, and that's the end. I'm just kidding. The same risks come up every single PI until they don't, right? And people are celebrating. Wow, we have no more risks. We're so awesome. Our art is just going. Nobody raises risks anymore because we don't have them anymore. Well, is it that you don't have them, or that people got tired of bringing up risks that no one does anything about? So lots of ways that roam can fail, right? We run out of time, all these things. And maybe you see some of these in the real world. And so I found that risk management and losing sight of this is a systemic issue. And you're setting aside one of the most powerful tools you have, which is making these risks and impediments visible to everybody on the art and leveraging the collective thought leadership and innovation to be able to get these things resolved. So what can you do about it? There's a technique I've been using, I guess, 5 or 6 years now, that works pretty good for the customers I've worked with. And the idea here is taking 2 tools we know, right? Roam and a Kanban board, right? And I say kind of Kanban-ish because this is not really the true, I had Dean, when I pitched this to Dean Leffingwell, he asked me, well, what about WIP limits? That's a tough one. I can make an argument why we do need WIP limits. I can also make an argument why we don't. I've got some customers that try and put WIP limits on the own stuff. I've seen some that don't. But when we think about it, combining roam plus Kanban. And all we're doing here, and Silvio, thank you for helping me get this canvas built out in PI Planning app. As you can see here, all we're doing is we're taking the owned part of roam and we're making it ready, in progress, review. So we're just putting a little Kanban flow into that so that we can make our risks visible, right? You know, visibility and transparency drive alignment. Alignment drives quality and execution. And so when we look at this, you know, it's a tool that everybody's already using. We want to make these visible. This is an artifact that comes with you outside of PI planning, or you come out of PI planning, you go to your risk Kanban and you put everything on there, right? And you know, you can prioritize the risks, right? Which risks do we want to go through? And what's interesting is that you might find, you know, as you're going through and doing your PI planning event, you don't have to wait until the risk, the roaming of risks to actually roam the risks. So, you know, if you're an RTE and you see a risk and everybody's talking about it, why wait till the end of PI planning to talk about it? You can have that conversation with somebody and really kind of say, hey, what can we do about this? So really mature arts and ones that where the RT is proactive, you'll actually get to that roaming of the risks, and you'll find that some have been resolved or mitigated or even accepted already, in which case you might talk about those. But the ones that do go into own, you know, that are owned, understand the priority. Right? Is one of these things going to, this top one here is going to impact, you know, 80% of our PI objectives, where this bottom one, it's a kind of a medium level risk to one of our uncommitted objectives, right? So kind of using that tool of just kind of prioritizing these. And, you know, when it's in this ready column, you know, it's been reviewed by the art and enough information is understood to take action. Oftentimes this will, you know, when we were doing things physically, on the back of it, you could read what the impact was, right? And so you have a little bit more information than what you just see on the sticky. We also want to remember that this is a pull-based system, right? So when it's in progress, someone's taken ownership and they're working actively on getting that risk to resolved or perhaps mitigated, or it may end up as accepted. And, you know, we want to think about this. If it's only one or two people who are working on this, this is the focus area. Anybody, if one of your senior stakeholders is walking by and they see the roam board up on the wall, they know if it's in progress, someone's actively taking action on it. Where if it's still sitting and owned ready, you know, maybe no one's touched it yet. So this kind of lets us know what work is in process and what's not. Additionally, make the risks part of your art sync, whether that be at your Scrum of Scrums or at your overarching art sync or even the PO sync. This is an artifact that you bring in. So when you're talking about, you flash up your program board, right? You flash up your objectives and how you're tracking to those, right? You flash up your program Kanban, but also your roam Kanban. So you kind of know what those things, where those things are. One of the other tips I'll throw out there to you is aging. This is something that I found to be really, really important because, you know, as I mentioned before, you'll have risks that go from PI to PI to PI. When I have a senior stakeholder ask me, well, what can I do to support, you know, to support the solution train or the agile release trains? And it's like, well, you know, first off, be present for all of PI planning. Don't just be one of those execs that stops by or even worse, records a little video that's an opening. You know, be there the entire PI planning event. As an executive, especially on the business side, walking around and talking to the teams, you'll be amazed at what you learn, and you might find that you can really change some things. The other thing, though, is that be aware that these are the things that are going to stop the teams from meeting their objectives. They've told you, hey, we can do this, but we're worried about these things. So I like to throw a little dot on a risk to represent each week or each iteration that's gone by. So if I'm walking, if the executive's walking down the hall, they glance over, they see six blue dots on this or little yellow stars on it, they realize, wow, you know, 6 weeks have gone by and nothing's happened with this. This is increasing the risk of our objectives not being met, right? Finally, demo the risks that are done. You'd be surprised at how powerful it can be when, you know, oftentimes leadership takes some of these risks that are more systemic issues, and at the system demo or the PI system demo, show what you've done. Let the teams know, hey, check this out. You were all worried about us not having test data, real test data. in our staging environment, check this out. We now have this, right? Make sure everybody knows. Or maybe it's something where there's not, a lack of system access or whatever that risk might be. Now you've resolved it, let people know. Also, that review state basically says, hey, stakeholders, hey, business owner and art leadership, we want to make sure that we're putting this from review over into the appropriate place. We believe this is resolved. Does the art leadership believe that? Do the stakeholders believe that, right? And so we'll discuss this during Art Sync. Sometimes it's discussed with an art leadership team, et cetera. Then the other piece, if you're if you're beyond the essential safe configuration, maybe you're part of a solution train, maybe there's multiple agile release trains underneath the portfolio. What you'll find oftentimes is the systemic issues that impact one art might impact your entire value stream. They might impact multiple value streams in your portfolio. And so a lot of times the customers at high scale, we end up putting these risk boards in place at each level of safe, so that we have a path to escalate this. So instead of having 3 directors on 3 arts chasing down the same thing, we've got an assistant vice president or associate vice president or VP who's got this on their radar and has taken ownership at a solution level or a portfolio level. So in summary, lots of different ways you can really make Rome rise with the use of Kanban. I've got a couple of just pictures here. We've all seen the standard risk board, right? But when you think about this, I said I've had lots of customers who've used this, and you got that ready and progress and done, right? And if you look at this one here, you can even see there's those dots. This one was sitting in the war room, the Cisco telepresence room for a senior vice president, and he had the program board right behind him, and he looks up to the right. He can see that risk board. He knows these are the things that are going to stop them. If you've got some great agile tooling, you can even build this out inside your tool. I like that because you can see here, we've got age on board, age in column. So we can actually kind of keep an eye on this, and we made those fields visible. So that's what I've got in my little lightning talk here for your opening. What thoughts or questions do you have?
Many thanks, Phil, for that great talk. Had really a few learnings. So yeah, the round is open for questions.
Let's see here.
Phil, thanks for sharing. What do you do with risks when they become impediments?
So for me, I actually use the same board. It's funny when we say risks, it's usually if we're using some sort of tooling to track them, we already have an impact statement on there, especially if we're looking at escalating these. If it's a program risk, we want to know what it's going to cost us. And so, not as much space on a sticky note, but oftentimes we have some sort of supporting documentation. Not when I say documentation, that sounds really heavy, but some impact statement. And sometimes that impact statement's already manifested and sometimes it hasn't, which kind of goes into that prioritization, right? We know that this thing up here, it's already bit us in past delivery, and we're afraid it's going to bite us again this delivery. An example of that is, hey, vendor X, they've never met a commitment. They always promise us at PI planning, and we always end, the last 3 PIs we've had to slip because they haven't met their commitments. That's really an impediment, but we raise it as a risk. So I usually put them both together and look at the impact. So what's the impact on delivery today and the impact on potential delivery, and just kind of keep them together. That's just kind of my style, but not the only way you can do it. I know there's a couple people on here that have used this model before, and feel free to chime in with things that you've learned as well.
So what's a tool you have used to show aging? I saw the image, but is it Jira, or is it some other tool that? So
this one's actually from a tool called AgileCraft that has now been, back when they were a startup, it's now been acquired. They've been acquired by Atlassian, and it's now known as Jira Align. I do know that the same functionality is available inside version 1. I haven't done this in Rally, but just in transparency, the last few years, most of my focus has been at the portfolio level and really kind of on the product management and portfolio side of things. And so it's common for me to work with customers that bring in a tool to sit on top of their team level tool, right? Now, I believe that Jira has this functionality with some plugins, but like I said, for it's really when I get to this point where I've got a physical board, I mean, I've got a digital board that's nested. Usually have got the portfolio or solution train running, and they've had that need for the scale that would justify a major, a major investment in a tool such as Jira Align or version 1.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And just to let you know, I do know you can, I work with the with the Department of Defense, who had DI2E Jira, and they didn't have anything on top at the time. And so I have seen situations where they just put in the, they put in the back, that they just throw the date on there. So it doesn't give you doesn't calculate it for you, but you have the date in the risk name. And so you know how long this thing's been plaguing you.